Rain came down in hard, slanting sheets, turning the shoulder of Interstate 85 into a ribbon of black glass. The few headlights that passed in the distance blurred into white streaks and vanished again, as if the whole world had decided this stretch of highway no longer belonged to ordinary people. It belonged to the stranded, the forgotten, and the men who had run out of chances. Marcus Reed stood half a step off the pavement, soaked through to the bone, staring at the red taillights of Vanessa Cole's SUV until they were swallowed by the storm. A minute earlier, he had still been in the passenger seat, believing her when she said she wanted to talk things through for Jaden's sake. He had come because their 8-year-old son had grown quieter lately, more careful with his words, as if he already understood that anything said around one parent could somehow make its way back to the other. Then Vanessa had pulled onto the shoulder and turned to him with that polished, controlled expression he knew too well. "Get out, Marcus." At first, he thought she was bluffing. Then she leaned across him, shoved the passenger door open, and told him exactly what she thought of him, that he was a burden, that Jaden needed stability, and that a man who kept falling behind had no right to call himself a protector. His wallet was still in the console. His phone and coat were still in the car. She drove away with all three. Now Marcus stood alone in the freezing rain, chest tight with shock and humiliation, beginning to understand that this was no impulsive act. Vanessa never did anything without a plan. Wind pushed cold water down the back of his neck. He looked up and down the highway. Nothing but darkness, guardrail, and rain. The last exit sat too far behind him. There was nowhere close to walk. No gas station lights. No diner. No porch with a bulb over the door. Just the long, wet shoulder and the sharp, ugly thought finally breaking through the numbness. Jaden. Vanessa had not invited him out tonight to work things out. She had staged something. And if she had staged this, then what came next had probably already started before Marcus even stepped into her car. He forced himself to breathe and took one step forward, then another. Headlights appeared behind him. Marcus turned, squinting through the downpour. At first he thought it was just another car that would fly past and throw more water at his legs. But these lights slowed. The engine was low and smooth, expensive in a way he could hear before he could see. A long black Rolls-Royce eased onto the shoulder and came to a graceful stop beside him, exactly 5 minutes after Vanessa had left him there. The rear passenger window lowered halfway. Inside sat a silver-haired woman in a charcoal coat, elegant and still, as if storms had never touched her a day in her life. Her eyes landed on Marcus with unsettling certainty. "Get in, Marcus Reed," she said. His blood ran cold. Because she didn't ask who he was. And before he could speak, the woman added, "If you stay out here much longer, you won't just lose tonight, you'll lose your son." If stories about family, dignity, and second chances mean something to you, take a second to subscribe and follow the channel. It helps more people find these stories, and it means you won't miss the next one. Marcus stood frozen in the rain, every survival instinct pulling in a different direction. He had just been humiliated by the mother of his child, stripped of his phone, his wallet, and the last illusion that Vanessa still saw him as anything other than a problem to manage. Now, a woman he had never seen before was speaking his name like she had been waiting for him. He should have backed away. He should have demanded answers. Instead, the storm cracked some of the pride out of him. So did the way she said Jaden's name without actually saying it. Like she knew the one thing that could still move him. Marcus leaned toward the opening in the glass. "Who are you?" The woman's gaze never shifted. Someone who knows Vanessa Cole is not improvising. "That's not an answer." "No," she said. "It's the part that matters first." The driver, an older man in a dark suit, sat motionless behind the wheel. Rain drummed on the roof. Marcus looked once down the empty highway behind him, once ahead into the same emptiness, then back at the woman inside the car. He was cold enough that his hands had started to shake. The rear door opened. "Get in," she said again. "You can distrust me while you're dry." Against his better judgment, Marcus did. The heat inside the car hit his face like a wall. A folded blanket was waiting on the seat. He didn't pull it over himself right away. He sat stiffly, water darkening the leather beneath him, ready to bolt if the conversation turned wrong. The woman watched him with a kind of patience that did not read as kindness. "My name is Evelyn Sterling," she said. The name meant nothing to him, though it sounded like the kind of name that came attached to buildings or foundations. Marcus rubbed rain from his eyes. "How do you know who I am?" "Because for the past week I have had someone watching Vanessa more closely than she realized." That snapped his attention into focus. "Watching her?" "She met with a family attorney twice in the last 10 days. She visited a home in another school district with Damian Cross, and she spent 40 minutes in a parking garage tonight making calls before she came to pick you up." Marcus turned toward her fully. "Why would you have anyone watching my ex-wife?" Evelyn looked out the window for a moment, then back at him. "Because I misjudged how far she was willing to go. I wanted confirmation before I stepped in." The answer only sharpened his suspicion. "Stepped in for what?" "For you." Marcus let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You don't even know me!" At that, something unreadable passed through her face. "I knew your father," she said. The car seemed to go quieter all at once. Marcus stared at her. "My father is dead. I'm aware." That one sentence, spoken so evenly, irritated him more than if she had lowered her voice and acted sympathetic. "How did you know him?" Marcus asked. "It's a long story," Evelyn said. "And tonight is not the hour for all of it. Tonight is about preventing a custody narrative from hardening before you understand it's being built." Marcus pressed his thumb into the wet seam of the blanket still folded beside him. "Say plainly what you're talking about." Evelyn did not hesitate. "Vanessa is preparing to present you as financially unstable, emotionally inconsistent, and unfit to provide long-term structure for Jaden. Tonight wasn't just cruelty. It was part of a larger move. She wanted you shaken. She wanted you humiliated. And if you had called her from a gas station angry, if you had shown up at her house furious, if you had sent even one text she could frame the right way, you would have handed her another piece." The words landed like metal. Marcus looked down at his soaked shirt, then back up. "How do you know that?" "Because people like Vanessa don't act out. They arrange." He hated how true that sounded. The car moved through the storm with smooth, eerie quiet. Charlotte's skyline appeared ahead as a glow through the rain. Marcus finally pulled the blanket over himself, not because he trusted Evelyn Sterling, but because he had started to believe that if he did not listen for the next 10 minutes, he might lose more than his dignity. They drove to a high-rise uptown. A doorman met them with an umbrella. Marcus nearly stopped in the lobby and turned around. Everything about the place made him feel out of scale. Marble floors, warm lighting, art too expensive to understand. But he followed Evelyn upstairs, not because he was impressed, but because the little she had said already matched the things he had been too tired to name in his own life. Her penthouse was quiet and immaculate. City lights spread beyond the windows like another world. A member of staff brought towels and dry clothes without asking questions. Marcus stood just inside the entry, water dripping from his sleeves onto pale stone. "I'm not changing into anything until you tell me why you're involved in my life." Evelyn removed her gloves finger by finger. "Then stay cold while you ask." He glared at her. A beat later, she said, "Dry off first, then coffee, then answers, in that order." Marcus wanted to tell her what she could do with her order. Instead, he took the towel and the clothes and shut himself in a guest bathroom the size of his entire kitchen. Under the hot water, the shock of the highway gave way to anger. Not only at Vanessa, at himself. He had gotten into her car tonight because he wanted one last chance to believe they could still talk like parents instead of enemies. That was the part he could not stop replaying. Not the humiliation, the hope. The stupid, lingering hope that Vanessa might care more about Jaden's peace than about her own advantage. When he came out in a dark sweater and slacks that fit too well to be random emergency clothing, Evelyn was waiting at a long dining table with 2 mugs of coffee and a thin folder. Marcus sat down but did not touch the folder. "Start with my father," he said. Evelyn held his gaze. Your father once warned me about men who planned to use my family as cover in a financial scandal. He had no reason to help me. He did it anyway. That warning gave me time to protect my children from being dragged under with other people's crimes." Marcus frowned. "My father was a mechanic." "Yes," Evelyn said, "and a man who paid attention." Memory moved through Marcus like a draft under a door. His father's hands blackened with grease, the smell of the garage, the quiet way he noticed things other people overlooked. He had died when Marcus was 21, long before Marcus understood how many kinds of courage there were. "I don't understand what that has to do with me," Marcus said. "I never forgot what he did," Evelyn replied. "I checked on your mother from time to time after he died. I knew when she struggled. I knew when you left community college to work more hours. I knew when you married Vanessa. I knew when the marriage began to fail." She let that sit between them. "I did not want to interfere with your life, but 6 weeks ago, someone mentioned Vanessa's name in connection with a property search and a family attorney I know well enough to be wary of. I had someone look closer." Marcus's coffee had gone untouched. "You had me watched?" "No," Evelyn said. "I had the situation watched. There's a difference." To Marcus, there was not enough of one. He opened the folder. Inside were summaries, not original documents, appointment dates, property search notes, and a typed page laying out exactly the shape of the story Vanessa seemed to be building. Employment gaps, support payments sent late, though completed, a smaller apartment, a less stable schedule, a mother with a more polished household, and a wealthier partner. On paper, it looked like a problem trying to call itself love. Marcus closed the folder and sat very still. "She's really doing this," he said, though he had known it before the words left him. Evelyn nodded once. "Yes. Why pick me up tonight instead of a week ago?" For the first time, she did not answer immediately. "Because until tonight," she said, "I was still deciding whether I would be helping a man who wanted to fight or a man who only wanted things to stop hurting." The bluntness of it sent heat up Marcus's neck. "You don't know anything about what I want." "No," Evelyn said, "but I know what I've seen. You absorb, you endure, you delay confrontation until the ground beneath you is already gone." It was a hard thing to hear from a stranger, harder because it wasn't entirely wrong. The next morning, she sent him to Lena Brooks. Lena's office overlooked downtown Charlotte through clean glass and expensive silence. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, precise, and seemed to have no interest in soothing anybody. Marcus respected that almost immediately. She listened without interrupting as he explained the highway, the folder, the calls, the years of trying not to turn everything into war. When he finished, she folded her hands on her desk. "I don't need a perfect father," she said. "I need a credible one." Marcus sat back. "That's your pitch?" "That's reality." She slid a yellow legal pad toward him. "Right now, Vanessa has narrative advantage. She probably always has. She looks organized. She speaks calmly. She knows how to frame concern as authority. Your job is not to outact her. Your job is to document what she cannot explain away." "What exactly does that mean?" "It means we build the truth in pieces. School emails, payment records, appointment history, witnesses, schedule changes, photos with dates. Any pattern that shows you are an involved father and she is manufacturing instability by controlling information." Marcus looked down at the blank legal pad. Lena tapped her pen against the top of it. "You made the mistake a lot of decent people make. You assumed that because your motives were clean, the facts would speak for themselves." He said nothing. "They don't," she said. "Not unless someone organizes them." That afternoon, Marcus went back to his apartment for the first time since the highway. The place looked smaller than usual after the penthouse, but in a way that steadied him. Thin walls, the hum of the refrigerator, the crooked kitchen table with cardboard under one leg, Jaden's drawing still pinned to the fridge with cheap magnets, a little paper planet with one ring falling off, a dinosaur that somehow resembled a lizard and a truck at the same time. Evidence of a child who knew this was not the nicest home in his life, but it still made himself visible inside it. On the table sat the half-finished volcano for Jaden's science project. Cardboard mountain, paint unopened, baking soda and red food coloring off to the side. Marcus stood over it for a long moment. Then he got to work. He dug through email. He searched old texts. He found transfer confirmations, school notices, soccer schedules, photos from dentist waiting rooms, selfies from pancake mornings, blurry shots of Jaden falling asleep on the couch during a thunderstorm with his head on Marcus's leg. There were more receipts of fatherhood than he expected. He had just never treated them like evidence because to him they were life, not exhibits. By the second day, patterns began to surface. Vanessa often texted during his busiest shifts, then later referred to him as slow to respond. She changed pickup times on short notice and saved the exchanges where he apologized for being late by 10 minutes, not the earlier messages showing she had moved the plan. She copied herself into school communications more aggressively than him, then spoke as if Marcus's absence from some updates was proof he was disengaged. It made him sick to realize how often she had controlled both the event and the description of the event. On the third day, he met Andre Lewis for coffee near the warehouse district. Andre had once worked beside him on loading docks and now supervised logistics for a regional distributor. He was broad, blunt, and allergic to self-pity. He listened to the whole story while stirring sugar into black coffee. When Marcus finished, Andre shook his head. "Man, she didn't leave you on the highway just to be cruel. She left you there so you'd feel what she wants you to feel. Small, off balance, like the next move already belongs to her." Marcus stared at the scratched tabletop. "That sounds right." Andre pointed his spoon at him. "You know what else sounds right? You've been giving her the first draft of every problem for years." Marcus frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means every time she changed the rules, you acted like the decent thing was to adapt. Every time she pushed, you told yourself not making a scene made you better than her." Andre sat back. "Maybe it did, but it also made you predictable." The word stuck. Predictable. That evening, Marcus emailed Jaden's teacher, Tasha Miller, and asked if they could talk. Tasha stayed after class the next day and met him in her room while sunlight faded through high windows. She was observant in the quiet way good teachers often are, not eager to overstep, but impossible to mislead completely. Marcus sat at a child-sized reading table and hated how much it felt like asking permission. "I'm not trying to drag you into something personal," he said. Tasha gave him a direct look. "You're asking about Jaden. That's not the same thing." Marcus exhaled. "Has he seemed different?" "Yes," she said gently. "He's still bright, still polite, still doing well in class, but he's more guarded than he was earlier in the year." "In what way?" "He double-checks things, especially when he talks about home." Tasha hesitated. "A few days ago, he asked whether living in an apartment meant a parent was still a real home." Marcus looked down at the edge of the little table. Tasha continued softly, "I told him homes are built by the people who love you and care for you consistently. But he didn't ask that out of nowhere." The sentence hurt more than anything Vanessa had thrown at him on the highway. "He talks about you warmly," Tasha added. "That matters." Marcus nodded once because he could not trust his voice. On the 5th day after the highway, Vanessa filed. The subject line on the email from Lena made his stomach turn before he even opened it. Emergency motion for temporary custody modification. Inside was exactly the narrative Evelyn had predicted, only cleaner and more aggressive. Vanessa alleged emotional instability, inconsistent availability, and living conditions not suitable for long-term security. The filing included cropped text messages, a statement describing Marcus as increasingly agitated after the divorce, and a summary of his employment gaps arranged to imply something close to collapse. He called Lena immediately. She answered on the second ring. "You got it." "She's lying." "Yes." "She's trying to take Jaden." "Yes." Marcus gripped the back of a chair until the wood creaked. "Tell me not to text her." "Don't text her." He let out a bitter breath. "I already know that." Good, Lena said. Then use the next 12 hours on the things that matter. We already have enough to start countering parts of this. And Marcus? He waited. Do not mistake being angry for being ready. The hearing happened fast, at the end of that same week. Fast enough that Marcus barely had time to gather what he had already found. Fast enough that the law felt less like justice than a machine that rewarded whoever came in better packaged. Vanessa entered the courtroom in muted colors and quiet concern. She looked like the sort of mother who remembered every form, every snack, every dentist appointment. The sort who would describe a custody battle as heartbreaking while using every inch of it. Marcus sat beside Lena and felt the whole room reading him before anyone spoke. His suit was clean but older. His face was more tired than composed. He knew how optics worked. Vanessa knew it better. The ruling was temporary, but it hit like a wall. Pending full review, his in-person contact was restricted. Not erased, not forever, but restricted enough to cut into his breathing. He stood in the corridor outside the courtroom while people passed carrying legal pads and coffee cups, as if ordinary afternoons were still possible. Lena came up beside him. This is not the end. She just made me a risk on paper. We're going to answer that. Marcus laughed once, short and broken. That's easy for you to say. No, Lena said, it isn't. But he barely heard her. That evening, he went back to Evelyn Sterling's penthouse, not because he trusted her, but because he was too angry to hold it alone. She was standing at the windows when he arrived, city lights reflecting faintly behind her. It happened, she said. Marcus stopped several feet away. You knew this could happen. I knew she was preparing. You knew enough. Evelyn did not deny it. The rage rose before he could shape it. You had people tracking her, collecting notes, watching all this from a distance, and you still waited until I was standing on a highway in the rain to say anything. His voice sharpened. Why? So I'd be desperate enough to listen? No. Then why? Evelyn turned fully toward him. Because I misread you. He stared at her. I thought your silence was discipline, she said. I thought your refusal to escalate meant you would step in when the line became clear enough. I was wrong. Vanessa understood before I did that you would keep absorbing damage in the name of peace. Marcus let out a harsh breath. You don't get to analyze me after helping this happen. Her face changed then, not dramatically, but enough for regret to appear. No, she said quietly. I do not. The room fell silent. Marcus looked at the city beyond the glass and suddenly hated the height, the comfort, the clean distance from everything that had been tearing through his life at ground level. You watched my life, he said. Yes. You knew things I didn't. Yes. And you decided when I was worth interrupting for. Evelyn held that with more honesty than he expected. I did. It felt in its own way like another abandonment. Marcus turned and walked out. He went home to the apartment, to the refrigerator hum and the wobbling table and Jaden's unfinished volcano. He sat in the kitchen in the dim light and looked at that cardboard mountain until the shape blurred. This was the part where he had always folded inward before, into exhaustion, into doubt, into the belief that maybe if he could just be patient enough, kind enough, non-confrontational enough, the truth of who he was would eventually become obvious to everyone who mattered. But now a judge had looked at papers and treated his fatherhood like a variable requiring caution. That was the cost of waiting to be understood. Marcus did not sleep much that night. He lay on the couch because the bed felt too much like surrender, and watched the first gray of morning gather at the window. By dawn, he understood something with a clarity that hurt. For too long, he had confused restraint with strength. He had not failed Jaden because he loved him too little. He had failed him by believing that staying quiet was always the noble choice. At 7 in the morning, there was a knock at the door. Andre stood there holding 2 coffees and a paper bag from the diner. You look terrible, he said. Marcus stepped aside. Come in. Andre set the food down on the table, saw the volcano, and understood more than Marcus had said aloud. Lena called me, he said. Said you walked out pretty raw. Marcus picked up a coffee. That's one way to put it. Andre leaned against the counter. Then hear this while you're still raw enough to listen. If you go into the next round trying to prove you're not a bad man, you lose. That's not the question anymore. The question is whether you can show a pattern stronger than hers. Marcus rubbed a hand over his jaw. I'm trying. No, Andre said. You've started reacting faster. That's not the same as taking control. The sentence stayed. By 8:30, Marcus was back in Lena's office. This time, he did not sit like a man waiting to be told what was happening to him. He sat forward. What do you need? He asked. Lena laid out the strategy without ceremony. A full timeline of parenting involvement, payment records with context and completion, school communication logs, witness observations, proof Vanessa had explored moving Jaden into a new district before any final ruling. Anything showing she manipulated access or built a story by controlling information. And one more thing, Lena said. You're going to write a declaration. Marcus frowned. About what? About yourself. Not a speech, not a performance. A truthful account of what kind of father you are, where you were slow, where you were overwhelmed, and what you are doing now. He looked at her. Wouldn't admitting weakness hurt me? Not if you tell the truth with structure. If you deny every flaw, you sound defensive. If you admit where you were passive but show clear action now, you sound credible. Marcus sat with that. Then he started rebuilding his life in documents. He printed transfers and highlighted the memo lines. Jaden's cleats, school lunch, winter coat, field trip fee. He organized photos by date. He got sign-in logs from basketball camp. He requested attendance history from Jaden's pediatric office. He found evidence that he had swapped shifts to make school events. He asked Tasha if she would provide a statement about Jaden's behavior and about the warmth with which the boy spoke of his father. He called an old supervisor willing to verify Marcus had taken less favorable schedules more than once to stay available for parenting time. Every ordinary detail mattered. That was the revelation. Fatherhood was not just the dramatic declarations, it was the repetition, the rides, the lunches, the half-finished projects, the shoes tied in parking lots, the appointments kept, the promises remembered. 3 days later, Evelyn asked to meet again. Marcus almost refused. In the end, he agreed, but only in Lena's office, and only because this could no longer be about his discomfort with being helped. It had to be about winning cleanly. Evelyn arrived without ceremony, dressed in dark wool, carrying a thin folder of her own. She sat across from Marcus and, for once, did not speak like someone arranging a chessboard. I owe you plain answers, she said. Marcus folded his arms. Start with the useful ones. She nodded. Through lawful private inquiry, property records, scheduling logs, and a source close enough to Vanessa's social orbit to know what she was bragging about, Evelyn had confirmed that Vanessa began planning a move tied to Damien Cross weeks before filing the emergency motion. She had already viewed homes in a different school district. She had already asked questions about transfer timing. She had already started building a version of the future in which Marcus became the unstable obstacle to a more polished household. Then Evelyn slid one more page across the table. This came from someone Damien trusted too much, she said. It was a transcript of a voicemail Vanessa had left him late at night, likely believing she was speaking casually and privately. Marcus read it once, then again. Marcus folds when pressure gets high. He always has. Push a little harder and he'll retreat on his own. Then we can stop pretending shared custody is workable. The room went silent. Lena took the page and read carefully. This may not be directly admissible as is, she said, but it is extremely useful for direction and impeachment if we can connect the surrounding facts. And the surrounding facts are already stacking. Marcus barely heard the second half. Marcus folds when pressure gets high. That was what Vanessa believed about him. Not that he was poor, not that he was lesser, not even that he was dangerous. Just that with enough pressure, he would eventually surrender the ground himself. The worst part was that she had reason to believe it. Marcus looked up at Evelyn. "Why show me this now?" "Because you cannot beat a role you refuse to name," she said quietly. "And because if you are going to stand up for your son, it cannot come from wounded pride. It has to come from finally understanding what you've been teaching people they can do to you." After that, the anger in Marcus changed shape. It got cleaner. No longer the helpless burn of a man left on a highway. Now it was purpose. He went home and wrote the declaration Lena wanted. He wrote about the divorce and what it had done to his confidence. He wrote about losing his old job and how shame had made him slower to fight for himself than for other people. He admitted that after the marriage ended, he had too often believed avoiding open conflict would protect Jaden from being torn between parents. He wrote that this had been a mistake. He wrote that silence can look like peace to the person using it against you. Then he wrote about his son, the pancakes, the science projects, the soccer fields, the doctor visits, the way Jaden still looked for him first after a good game, the way he crouched to meet the boy at eye level because children deserve to be spoken to, not managed from above. He ended with a sentence Lena told him not to change. "Jaden knows me not as a visitor in his life, but as his father." When she read the declaration the next morning, Lena nodded once. "Good," she said. "This sounds like a man telling the truth, not a victim asking to be believed." The final hearing came under clear skies. Marcus wore the same suit as before, but it felt different on him now. Not like a costume for respectability, just clothes on a man who had finally stopped apologizing for standing where he belonged. Vanessa entered polished as ever. Damien sat 2 rows behind her, expensive watch catching the light. He looked uneasy enough to suggest that whatever fantasy of clean, elegant transition Vanessa had sold him was starting to cost more than expected. Lena built the case piece by piece. She introduced the timeline of Marcus's involvement, the payment records, late at times but always completed, the school communication pattern, the witness statements, Tasha's observations that Jaden spoke warmly of his father and anxiously about housing in ways no child should, the appointment logs, the evidence that Vanessa had already begun laying groundwork for a school change before the emergency filing. Then came the voicemail transcript, not as a magical last-second weapon, but as a line that suddenly made the surrounding behavior coherent. For the first time, Vanessa's face shifted. Not much, just enough. Her attorney objected. Lena answered. The judge reviewed. Some parts were limited, some parts remained. But the larger point had already taken root. This was not a mother responding to crisis. This was a parent managing optics and leverage. When Marcus was called to speak, the old instinct rose. Explain everything, soften every sharp edge, make himself easy to forgive. He ignored it. He answered plainly. Yes, he had struggled financially after losing his old role. Yes, some payments had been late. Yes, he had avoided escalating conflict longer than he should have. No, he said when asked whether that meant he stepped away from his responsibilities as a father. It means I made the mistake of believing love would still be visible if I kept the peace. I know now that protecting my son also means protecting the truth of my place in his life. Lena asked what he wanted the court to understand most. Marcus looked toward the bench and then, briefly, toward the empty space where Jaden should never have become an argument. I am not asking to be treated like a perfect man, he said. I'm asking not to be erased from my son's childhood because I was slower to defend myself than someone else was to accuse me. There was no theatrical collapse after that. No shouted confession from Vanessa. No sudden miracle. Real life did not move that way. But patterns did matter when enough light was put on them. By the end of the hearing, the judge lifted the temporary restriction, rejected the framing of Marcus as a clear parental risk, and ordered a more balanced custodial structure with tighter communication requirements and reduced room for one parent to quietly control access and narrative. It was not revenge, it was better. It was ground reclaimed. Outside the courthouse, Marcus stood on the steps in the afternoon sun, blinking as though the day itself had been handed back to him 1 degree at a time. Lena came out beside him. We'll still need consistency, she said. This doesn't mean life gets easy. Marcus nodded. I know. But today mattered. He looked down at the city traffic moving below the steps. Yeah, he said after a moment. It did. The reunion with Jaden happened 2 days later in a supervised family transition room, painted in soft colors no child would ever have chosen for himself. Marcus stood near a shelf of board games and worn stuffed animals, every nerve in his body sharper than it had been in court. The door opened. Jaden stepped in with his backpack hanging from one shoulder. For one terrible second, the boy just stood there, looking at Marcus as if making sure he was real. Then he ran. Marcus dropped to one knee and caught him hard, both arms closing around a body that felt too small to have taken up this much space in his mind every waking hour. Jaden pressed his face into Marcus's shoulder. Dad? I'm here, Marcus whispered, holding on. The boy pulled back enough to look at him. His eyes were bright and frightened and hopeful all at once. You didn't leave? It was such a small question, and inside it was everything. Marcus put a hand on the back of his son's neck. No, he said. I didn't leave, and I'm not going anywhere. Jaden stared for another second, then nodded once as if filing the sentence somewhere he would return to later when fear tried to argue with memory. A few days after that, they sat at the kitchen table finishing the volcano. Red paint got on Jaden's fingers. Baking soda dusted the cardboard base. When they finally poured in the vinegar and watched the foamy red eruptions spill over the sides, Jaden laughed so loudly the neighbors probably heard. Marcus laughed too. The apartment was still small. The table still needed cardboard under one leg. Bills still existed. Work was still work. None of that had changed overnight. What had changed was deeper. Marcus no longer mistook endurance for action. He no longer believed that the truth of his life would protect itself if he just stayed quiet long enough. He had looked directly at the role Vanessa expected him to keep playing, the exhausted man who retreated under pressure and stepped out of it. A week later, Evelyn Sterling came by once, this time in an ordinary dark sedan instead of the Rolls-Royce that had found him on the highway. She did not come in until Marcus invited her. Jaden, curious and polite, thanked her for the model rocket kit she brought, then carried it to his room like treasure. Evelyn stood near the refrigerator looking at the drawings held up by magnets. He looks like you did at that age, she said. Marcus leaned against the counter. That a compliment? It was meant as one. He nodded. The anger between them was no longer hot, but it had not disappeared. You were wrong to wait, he said. Evelyn turned to face him. Yes, you don't get credit for mystery. A faint smile touched her mouth. No, I suppose I do not. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus said, My father would have stepped in sooner. Something softened in her eyes, just enough. Yes, she said quietly. That is one of the reasons I know he was the better person. Marcus almost smiled at that. When she left, she did so without fanfare. That felt right. Because in the end, the Rolls-Royce had not stopped on the highway to save a helpless man. It had only marked the moment when Marcus Reed was forced to see how close he had come to being erased from his own life. The real change happened after that. In bank statements and school logs. In a declaration written honestly instead of defensively. In a teacher's careful observations. In a courtroom where he finally stopped trying to seem harmless and started insisting on being seen accurately. And most of all, in a small apartment where a little boy needed to hear that his father had stayed. Some people look strong because they speak loudly, win quickly, or always seem in control. But real strength is not always like that. Sometimes it looks like a parent who keeps showing up, even after being hurt, humiliated, or pushed aside. Sometimes it looks like a person who finally understands that being kind does not mean letting others walk over them. Marcus's story is a reminder that love is not just about feeling deeply. It is also about protecting the people you love when life gets unfair. Being gentle is a beautiful thing. But when your silence starts costing you your place, your dignity, or the people who matter most, then staying quiet is no longer peace. If this story touched your heart, Subscribe and follow the channel for more stories about family, resilience, and second chances. And if you remember one thing from Marcus Reed, let it be this: you can be a good person, a soft-hearted person, and still learn how to stand up for yourself when it matters most.